This is the Think Big session for verified testing for November 2020. Today is the Think Big portion. We are do a Think Big and then the next week do a Think Small. So getting back into these, today we're going to talk about code coverage reports. And I have a link into the issue, which I don't think has too much more information than what is in the agenda that we're looking at. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off and ask the question, what's the problem that we would try to solve with a code coverage report? Scott or Max, can you provide us a developer perspective?
Well, the developer perspective is be able to easily see what code I have not written tests for, right? And that's helpful in a few different scenarios. One, the overall project, like what is our percentage wise of how much of our repo is covered by tests. The other side of that is in a code review, when I'm reviewing someone's new code that they've made changes to how much of their new code is actually being tested.
And a code coverage report, like if you were using Jest or something and it spits out Cobertura report and you're looking at it in an HTML view, it solves that problem for you.
Yes.
You don't sound sure. Other tooling can apply here. Don't take just the brand names I give you.
Yeah, we're just, I think, just making that easy to parse out would be helpful rather than having to understand a Cobertura report.
So it sounds like you talked about a couple different workflows there. You talked about the overall project repository, what's the coverage like, and then as part of a code review workflow. What other workflows would this report be handy in?
Oh yeah, maybe something we discussed previously will be the fact that if you introduce like new change, which decrease the overall coverage of your test or of your code, like you won't be able to ship that piece of code. Like that could be another.
So like a blocking feature where if coverage decreases, then it blocks the MR.
Yep. But to me, like the coverage report itself, like the feature as a developer is like more a visual tool that tells me right away, like if my code is tested or not. And as a reviewer, it's super helpful because I can see where the piece of code introduced was not tested probably, which one is tested. And I'm now confident that we can ship that piece of code because we added like test coverage, right?
Cool. So it sounds a lot like the existing feature that we have, the test coverage visualization, seeing it as part of the code review process. I want to circle back to looking at a project holistically. There's a couple of different bits of data that come out of the Cobertura report or could come out of it. You could get just raw line coverage, function coverage, and I don't remember what the other ones are, but there's a couple of different stats that can come out of that. What is your experience with using those different numbers and how they're helpful or not helpful when looking more at like holistically the project? And Ricky, feel free to jump in here too to provide us with some team lead perspective.
Yeah.
I was just typing up my my thoughts here in terms of.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so the overall health, I think, is the important thing as an engineering lead. So you can focus on areas that you might want to schedule some tasks for. The other thing that I did a lot in the past was kind of like okay, here's my project. I know which workflows and which files are the most risky. So for example, if I'm working on an application that takes payments, I know that that workflow where I take the payment is going to be the most risky part of my application. And then I want that to have really, really high coverage, like probably 100% coverage. But the part where I send a newsletter probably like don't need as high coverage as the part where I'm taking a payment. And I'm not saying that was a bad example. I was trying to think of something that was really not important, but newsletters can be important to the business as well. When if I could, like, something that would be neat would be if I could highlight certain files or workflows as being high risk and have like different rules that apply to those workflows. That might be kind of nice. So I could say, hey, if anything is committed to this, it would be even cooler if you could do that. And you could say, hey, if anything is committed to this file, this person needs to review it. And and the test, like as far as coverage goes, the test coverage cannot dip, but also this person is like a special reviewer for this. So if we could have like that type of annotation, that'd be really neat. We kind of do that with code owners, I think. So if we combined code owners plus special coverage rules for certain sections, that might be neat. But I think that's something that I was focusing on a lot when I was at my last job too, was like, hey, there's this part of the workflow where we actually go and we create a subscription with somebody's like tokenized credit card information. This needs like a lot of tests.
Yeah, business critical, right? I think your example was good, being a little hard on yourself, right? I mean, there are things that are business critical versus not, right? You think about the things that get into production. Yeah, you want to have like maybe some more guardrails or some more, some more stringent gates there, and that's cool. And it's interesting because I was thinking about the individual developer. What do I gain from this versus an aggregate level or a manager or a team lead? So that's cool that we're delineating between those two here. Both really important. Mm-hmm.
So the code coverage report, as it stands today, is kind of a snapshot in time. You see what is coverage the last time this report was generated. Where are there gaps there potentially, or how can we improve on that view?
I think the much, like a lot of our reports are kind of either we just host an artifact that people can go and look at, but we don't have like a holistic, okay, this is code coverage dashboard report thing, right? Like same with code quality. You can go into a pipeline and you can look at the code quality thing for an individual pipeline, but there's no like project level code quality page that has all the code quality information. And same with code testing and coverage. There's not like a project level thing where you can go and manage, you feel like you're managing the code quality, or you're managing the code testing and coverage of a project at that level. It's more just like, well, the pipeline did a thing and then we smushed that thing into the pipeline, or we smushed that thing into the merge request, which are great. But I think that the next like level to build up onto that would be at the project level. And then we're already kind of thinking this way with coverage reporting at the group level. So it would be interesting to have like a finer grain view, like I was talking about, like, hey, here's all the files. I want to ignore this file in the UI. I want to pay special attention to this file in the UI, and have that kind of like that's really what SonarQube does too, is they kind of just give you the files, and then you have special abilities to like say, no, I don't care about this code quality warning specifically, and then it remembers, because that's what it is. Mm-hmm. That's what kind of application it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of that is based on work that you as a developer, you as a manager have done to set this up and get this out, and then it's on you to kind of interpret those things. I'm skipping ahead because we've talked about who has this problem, who's doing this job. We've talked primarily about the developer and the team lead. But if the team lead, you just started up a new project or moved a new project into GitLab, moved an existing project maybe, ran a pipeline just to get it all running. And parts of the output of that would be here's the top 10 files that you should look at from a quality perspective because of low coverage, low quality, whatever else we have. So that you could then just go start creating issues from that based on what GitLab knows about the project. And you may already have an inkling about that because it's, you know, your team's code, but it might be that reinforcing bit that you then trust GitLab to say, okay, here's where the tech debt is and what it should go eliminate. What other ideal outcomes for developers or managers would we be looking to get to if we more tightly incorporated code coverage reports into GitLab?
I think if we're going to do gating, it has to be really, really, really easy for the engineer to figure out specifically which line, which file, and specifically which line in which file is the that's preventing this from happening. I know in previous things that I've used, you kind of throw it up there and then it just gives you, oh, well, the code coverage went down. And it's like, great, where? And what test do I need to write in order to get that back up? So as specific as possible to let the engineer go and fix the problem. Maybe even like, it'd be super neat if it was like, you should probably add a test in this test file for this file. So like that even that extra thing, so you don't have to go, oh, okay, well, this isn't covered, but where should I put this test? Like it'd be super neat if there's some way to say, well, you need to write a test in this file that covers this line.
Can we leverage some of the mapping work that's being done on the find failures to do that?
I think like, yeah, if you could do like a reverse test file finder, or I guess it would be still a forwards test file finder, but.
Yeah. But yeah, if you add code to a file and it's already mapped into a test file, you could say, hey, like as part of the workflow, it would say that code coverage is decreased, and it would be some sort of tip or trick or hint of, here's the file that you probably need to add a test into because of this mapping that you've provided.
Yeah, and I wonder if it could even like, you could like copy the file path to your clipboard or something, and then you just go and open it on your thing and start writing a test right away. Like that would be kind of neat.
Scott, Max, feedback?
I could open up the web ID for that file.
Yeah.
Are we worried about portraying to the user, like if they write a test that happens to be for that line, but it's happens to be in a different file, then it's going to fail? Or are we worried about being too prescriptive here or too opinionated on that spot? I know that's getting a little nitty gritty thing, just
It's a good question.
pushing it down.
I mean, I think we could probably constrain later. Today's really about, what could the ideal look like? I mean, ideally, we could just say generate the test, right? Like, it looks like you need to add a test into this file, and it might look like this. Do you want us to add it for you?
Apply our suggestion.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I would like that. Do it for all my tests.
Yeah. Hey, was it DangerBot adds labels for you, or like suggest labels?
Yeah, I think suggestions always go a long way. Just from research into the persona of a developer, especially, like they got a lot going on all the time, right? Like context switching, all these. So the more, I think we look at it as a very risky thing sometimes to be prescriptive and opinionated, and I think they welcome that. I think sometimes they even welcome over prescriptive approaches because at least they know, hey, I don't want to do this, right? Or thank you for the suggestion, but no thanks, right?
Yeah,
it's cool.
Cool. So we have some great thoughts here on ideal outcome for developer using a code coverage report, getting some additional information out of that report back into their day-to-day workflow. How about that team lead persona? What's an ideal outcome look like for them? Stepping back out to that, here's your project. What's the coverage look like? What's the quality look like?
I think the overall coverage number is nice, but it's a little opaque there. It'd be great for the lead to be able to drill down a little bit on sections of the app. Maybe they care about more, like in Ricky's regard, like, hey, we care about this payment section more than other sections. What is our coverage percentage on this area of our code base?
Mm-hmm. That matches up with a lot of the conversations I had doing a first round of problem validation around code coverage reports, of people just want to see, like, not just overall what is the project coverage. I need that next step down so that I can go find those files and figure out where we can quickly improve coverage or where we might have problems of persistent bugs.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea about honing in on a certain section of the code, whether it be through setting up a config in the GitLab CI YAML, or whether it be building a full-on thing into the projects page where you can go and set up a configuration that says, hey, anything that has the word payment, any file that matches this regex string, like star payment star, that needs like more tests. That's high priority, or that's medium priority, or that's low priority in terms of code coverage. And then further being able to set up what that means in the project would be kind of neat. So like, okay, if it's high priority, you cannot decrease the coverage at all. If it's medium priority, you can decrease it by like 2 or 3%, and that's probably fine. If it's low priority, I'm not even going to apply a coverage gate to the merge request.
Would you do that by file or by section within files of the code?
See, that's the tricky part, and it'd probably be pretty language dependent. Like what I would want to do in a perfect world that doesn't exist is be able to like kind of identify code paths or workflows. Like, give me a trace and I'll show you all the things that trace runs through, and this trace cannot have any coverage decrease on it. So in a perfect world, it would look like that. But I'm pretty sure we're a little bit far away from that right now. So if we had just file, then that would be a great, I think, as well.
That's an interesting approach, though, of like, hey, here's all the paths that it goes through, even potentially across projects, and say this is a business critical workflow, and we're going to apply things at the workflow level or the value stream level, versus just with thinking within a project and within files within the code base. That'd be very cool.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome. I'd sign me up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, let's so thinking big, that is a pretty big thing, I think. And that's what I'm going to take away from this is, hey, let me identify paths through my application that potentially stream or span groups, projects, whatever, and apply a code coverage requirement to that path. How can we differentiate what we're thinking about from some existing solutions out in the marketplace? I called out Sonar, CodeCov, Coveralls are some of the code coverage reports and coverage report tools that are out there, and ones that we hear about when we talk with users of things that they're looking for. How can we build on what we have, having source, having CI, having monitoring data, whatever else you want to think about from that all-in-one DevOps toolchain that GitLab provides, that we can really differentiate from these other vendors?
It's like you read my comment while I was typing it. I was just typing in there how specifically I think what about having an all-in-one GitLab solution can we leverage in terms of code coverage.
I like that idea of the suggestion of, hey, here you have decreased coverage. I see the new code. I see where you've got existing mapping. Let me at least tell you where you're likely to be able to add a test quickly, even if we don't provide you with the full-on test. But if you take that a step further and say, hey, you've already got 50% coverage in this project, so I kind of know what your tests look like. Here's what this test might be, and suggest that. We could probably build on some ML and some other bits there.
Even if you had kind of like a default, oh, we can tell that they're using Jest. So here's the default Jest test. This is what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like whatever block of code is typical for a test that asserts nothing. And then they can kind of copy that, click on the thing, go to the web IDE, put their test in there, quickly write the thing they want to assert, and then commit it in the web IDE, like from the example block.
Just providing that templated, that scaffolding for the test would be pretty nice.
Yeah, if you want to talk about ML, like there's ML algorithms that classify things. So they could look through the test directory and then classify it like, well, this is probably Jest, or this is probably Go, and so they're probably using Ginkgo or something. And then, okay, here's what Ginkgo maps to in terms of blank test.
What if we took that ML a little bit further and said, hey, we see that you're creating incidents in these projects, and that follow-ups from those are MRs fixing tests or fixing code. Maybe your unit tests weren't testing enough or something. It's probably integration testing at that point that is foobarred and not the unit test, but it might be something to think about.
I wonder if there's a simpler thing, like as you report incidents, I wonder if we tie them to specific files or something. And then you can say, hey, this incident was caused by this line in this file. And that way we can kind of build that into the project level view of what's important and what's not important. If this one file is causing a lot of incidents, then hey, that's probably a really important file.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that work stream too or that code path of going down this path. We've had multiple incidents. We need to, think more about resiliency of this code and, apply that somehow. It needs multiple code reviews, not just one, as things are going out.
Yeah, I just started thinking when you were talking about leveraging the single DevOps platform, like sewing a thread through a bunch of different aspects of the application about the feature. And if we can do that enough times, then it becomes more useful. So think about, like you said, there's an incident. Think about tying that back to a file and think about exposing the coverage of that file in the incident view. Say, hey, like there's an outage caused by this line. The code coverage is 100% or it's 20%. And the other things I was thinking about were you're browsing the code and you have a little thing, hey, this is X% covered. Maybe you want to expose, like you said, a list of a view that shows the files by coverage. That would take into account maybe the ignore settings. So if we're ignoring files, then we're not gonna shove it in your face that there's not very much coverage on that file, because it probably doesn't matter because you've ignored it. So being able to like tool in the ignores into the application while you're viewing stuff would be really neat, as opposed to, I think a lot of things when it does that and it kind of like presents it to you, it doesn't take into account all the other touch points that you've had with the application where you've told it something about code coverage. Especially when you have like plugins and Jenkins and all your stuff's all over the place. When it's surfacing things into you, it might say like, hey, this file has 0% coverage. And I'm like, I know, it's a config file. It doesn't need any coverage.
Yeah, does not need coverage. We were talking earlier about that. The generated report of here's the here's your top 10 files that need some sort of work on them. And thinking even a little bit more broadly, it can combine code coverage and code quality. If there was a way to just generate issues from all of those that contained all of the necessary information and linked back to some sort of dashboard, I think that kind of ties from the source and the plan bits together as well back into Verify to say, especially when you're going back through or when you're running pipelines, to say, hey, code quality issue found in here. Oh, there's an issue open for that. If I resolve it with my merge request, I can also resolve that issue at the same time and clean up some code coverage or code quality problems. Thinking from the manager perspective, like it'd be great to get that list of files, but I don't want to have to go create 20 issues to address that tech debt for my team. If GitLab did it for me, oh, that's a happy day, I think. Just because I know there's no CSV upload, or I don't think there's a CSV upload to create issues in GitLab. I may have used that with other companies' products in the past. Awesome. Well, we have, I'm sorry, go ahead, Parker.
I would say that give you the ability to look at trends too, right? Like not just a single point in time, but as a manager, like, yeah, a single point in time may be very, very important to you as a developer, especially if you're looking back at these snapshots, but that would be able to show you a trend. Hey, in the last quarter, how did our code coverage improve? And then if you're talking about like being able to segment or ignore like that kind of listed view you were talking about, Ricky, then you've got, oh, let's not look at the ones that we don't care about, right? You said this is a config file, right? Let's look at this stuff that's important and how did that trend? And if it's going up, that's a great thing, right?
Yep. Cool.
Yeah, just to quickly revisit the thing you said about automatically creating issues. What if we're thinking big today? What if it automatically opens an MR? What if it opens an MR with the test that fixes it, or it opens an MR with like because it knows what file the test should be in because the test file finder. So it opens an MR into that file with like the boilerplate test, and then you just open that up in the web IDE in the merge request and add your test and then commit it. You don't even have to open your IDE. You fixed it. You fixed the problem in GitLab and created the issue in GitLab and then fixed the problem in GitLab, not created the issue.
So create an issue, create an MR, drop in the scaffold for the test based on the mapping that you have with test file finder. All you have to do is apply a suggestion that actually adds the logic to the test. And then you can run it, merge it, and be done with it. Yeah. I think that's pretty snazzy.
What a wonderful world we're living.
Love it. Cool. Well, we are at time. I want to be respectful of calendars, as always. If you have more thoughts, though, feel free to drop them into the doc or continue the conversation, and I'll add notes to the doc over in Slack. I'm happy to continue it there. And then next week, we'll go from the divergent back to the convergent thinking and think about, great, so here's this world where Ricky, our team lead, gets a report and auto-generates issues that auto-generate MRs with tests in them, and Max is following up and just closing things out left and right. This is how we're going to increase our MR rate. And how we can build something in an upcoming milestone that takes us one step closer to that brave new world.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. This was good. Appreciate it. Cheers.